All right, welcome everyone to this week's meeting of the Clyde Sukeforth chapter of SABR. I am Bruce McClure, the chapter chair, and we always hold our meetings in conjunction with the Gardner-Waterman chapter of SABR in Vermont, Dr. Clayton Truder, chair. Now, before we get started tonight, I've got a couple of announcements. I want to start with a little bit of chapter news for everybody this evening. This afternoon, I accepted Michael Lewis's resignation from his position as our membership lead. Per our recently ratified bylaws, the remaining board of directors will appoint a new membership lead in the near future. If you'd like to be considered for the role, you must have the Clyde Sukeforth chapter selected as your primary connection with SABR and live in either the state of Maine or New Hampshire. If you're interested, please email me at bruce@brucemcclurenh.com.
I do not.
Now, this one's from the Boston chapter. Most everyone in SABR has a favorite team. It's part of being a relatively normal baseball fan. As it happens, we think it's safe to suggest in the Boston chapter, and maybe even ours here in Maine and New Hampshire, that many of our members are either fans of the Red Sox or at least take somewhat more notice of them. We want to suggest something new for our SABR members. We think it may be something that other chapters or maybe other ad hoc groups might like to emulate. Join us in the traditions set forth and carried on by the likes of Hi Dixwell, Nuff Said McCreevy, Kurt Gowdy, and even Dixie Tarango. This is the right time of year to begin the Hot Stove Winter League. Join the Boston chapter for their initial Zoom social. They'll be making it up as they go along, but they'll launch the first one on Wednesday, November 20th, 2024 at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. The Zoom social will celebrate, ruminate, or maybe even complain about the Red Sox, all part of Boston fandom and the emotions that have endured since 1901. The sign-up link is in the SABR events calendar, and you can even sign up for the East Coast Cooperative event the hour before and fill your evening with some great baseball talk. Should be a fun evening. Finally, last call for submissions to Here Comes the Pizza, the found poetry of baseball announcers. I love this project. Chapter member Eric Poulin, a good friend of mine, is putting out a final call for additions to SABR's Found Poetry Anthology to be published in the spring of 2025. What is found poetry? Found poems take existing texts and refashion them, reorder them, or present them as poems. The literary equivalent of a collage, found poetry is often made from newspaper articles, street signs, graffiti, speeches, letters, or even other poems. A pure found poem consists exclusively of outside texts. The words of the poem remain as they were found, with few additions or omissions. Decisions of form, such as where to break a line, are often left to the poet. SABR members are being asked to take play-by-play calls throughout history and fashion them into found poems. Examples can be found in the most recent edition of Turnstile. It's a great way to honor historic play-by-play people who have given us such fond memories over the year. And honestly, it's a lot of fun. For more information or submit a poem, contact Eric Poulin directly at sixtolescano1@yahoo.com. All right. On with our feature presentation. The average Major League Baseball game was 24 minutes shorter in 2023 than 2022, coming in at 2 hours and 40 minutes. This is the fastest time since 1985, and the first year the average has been under 3 hours since 2015. The implementation of the pitch clock received most of the media attention as an explanation for the shorter game length, but it is not the only factor that brought about the decrease. There were also rule changes relating to pickoff attempts, limitations on batters calling timeout, and stricter enforcement of time between innings during mound visits, replay challenges, and substitutions. Our presenter examines these other factors in addition to the effect of the pitch clock, analyzing data obtained from MajorLeagueBaseball.com, where freely available files give the exact timing of every event in every 2023 game, including each pitch down to the 1/100th of a second. He discusses the impact of different events on game times. And oh man, am I thrilled to introduce to you David W. Smith. Joined SABR in 1977 and has multiple papers in the Baseball Research Journal. He has made research presentations at, get this, 25 national conventions and many more at regional meetings. He has won the Doug Pappas Award, originally established as the USA Today Sports Weekly Award, for Best Convention Oral Presentation 3 times, and in 2005 received SABR's highest honor, the Bob Davis Award. And he was honored with the Henry Chadwick Award in 2012 too. Wow. David W. Smith is the founder of oh man, I'm excited. I can't even say it. He is the first president and founder of RetroSheet and is an emeritus professor of biology after 40 years of service at the University of Delaware. Oh my goodness, David Smith, baseball legend and titan. Welcome to Northern New England. How are you?
Doing great. I'm not sure about the legend part, but that sounded pretty good.
It's all yours, man. I'm stepping out of the way. Go get them.
Okay, here we go. As the title said, where did the 24 minutes ago? Once I saw that the game times had gotten so much shorter in 2023, I really wanted to try to track it down because I had done 2 previous papers on length of game. I did it in Pittsburgh in 2017 and in San Diego in 2019. As each different presentation I put together, I had better data. MLB created better data, which they made available, and I grabbed it, and that's what I'm using for this. So here we go. This picture will probably look familiar in its general form to people.
David, I need for you to share your screen. I apologize for interrupting you. I need for you to go down to the bottom and hit that share button.
Man, how could I do that? I know better than that. Time out. Video. How about that?
So hit share and then click your presentation and it should come up on the screen. There it is.
Got it?
And it should pop up and just there we go. Go get them.
Sorry about that. Okay, so here's my first slide. That's Brandon Marsh, who's a distinctive looking figure, playing center field for the Phillies. And you see over his head is a clock. It says 13 seconds. That is over the bullpens off in the basically right center field. And the green to his our left there is the batter's eye. There's another clock on the other side of the green stuff. There's like 5 clocks around the stadium. So when people talk about the pitch timer, there are many, many clocks in the stadium. So the first basic principle behind all of this is how much game length has changed over history. Starting in 1910, when we started getting decent data for game length, here it is over the last 120 some years. And you see that it was barely 110 minutes in 1910, not even 2 hours. And it went up and up, but it wasn't constant. There's a big jump there. There's a jump there, another one there, another one there. But of course, the big one is last year when it went down 24 minutes. The red line across the top is at 180 minutes, which is 3 hours. I just put that there as a reference for people. So we get one, I say last year because I presented this in August of 2004. So last year means 2023. So it went from 186 minutes to 162 minutes. Although you can see from this figure, the drop actually began a year before that. In 2022, it actually started going down a little bit. This is the biggest change ever by far in a single year. The next biggest one was a 9-minute drop between 1962 and 1963. Concerns about slow games have been raised for many years, especially by sports writers, as the average climbed toward the 3-hour mark, a level which was exceeded for the first time in 2001. Major League Baseball has taken steps since the start of the current century to lower that average. For example, limits were set for the allotted time between innings, which was enforced more rigidly. Batters were constrained in taking timeout between pitches by being limited to the area around home plate when they stepped out. Pitching was affected when in 2020, a rule was implemented that a reliever was required to face 3 batters or pitch to the end of the inning he entered. This last rule change about the 3 batters is supported by data showing that mid-inning changes consumed a lot more time. So here's some data from my 2019 presentation in San Diego. If you put in a new pitcher at the start of an inning, it adds 14 seconds to the game. If you change from the middle of an inning, it's 2 minutes and 18 seconds. That's a pretty stunning difference. And so obviously Major League Baseball wanted to lower the number of mid-inning changes that there were. But the most dramatic change is the pitch clock. The pitch timer is coming in 2023. It constrains both the pitcher and the batter, as we will see. I'll give you the details of that rule in just a minute. But first, let's look at the effect. So this graph shows game times by month in 2023 and 2024. Now, I made this presentation in August, so at that time I only had, well, the blue bars are 2023, the red bars are 2024. So I did this in August, I only had data through July. Since then, I've got for the rest of the year, and what you find is that it hasn't changed. That it, not only did it go up last year, look at the blue bars, it went up and up and up, so that it was some 7 minutes slower at the end of the year than it was the beginning. For 2024, it didn't go up at all. People are really getting the hang of this, and it stayed really quite constant. And so the 2024 time is actually 4 minutes faster than the 2023 time. So it's done even more. So the temptation is very strong to say that all of the 24-minute drop came from speedier time between pitches. But the timer affected other parts of the game as well, as we'll see in a minute. Let's review the rules. First of all, pitcher must pitch within 15 seconds with the bases empty, 20 seconds with runners on base. The clock starts when the pitcher receives the ball from the catcher and runs until the pitching motion starts, not when he actually delivers the ball, it's when he starts his motion. 3, the batter must be ready to hit with at least 8 seconds left. 4, a pitcher violation, if he doesn't meet the timer, is an automatic ball. Batter violation, it's an automatic strike. The batter gets 1 timeout per plate appearance. The pitcher gets 2 disengagements, after throw to first or stepping off the rubber. You get throw to any base or stepping off the rubber. You get 2 per plate appearance with runners on. A third disengagement that does not retire a runner is a balk, which happened in the World Series, as we just saw concluded. Disengagement count is reset if the runner advances. If he steals a wild pitch or pass ball, the counter goes back to 0 and they start again. I discovered in 2019 that the average pickoff throw consumed 25 seconds, and these throws accounted for 2/3 of the pitch interval increase with runners on. Therefore, the disengagement limits are another area that was ripe for being shortened. It's essential to understand exactly when the timer starts, since everything else flows from there. As the rule states that I showed you, the nominal start occurs when the pitcher receives the return throw from the catcher. But there are other situations to consider, such as if a new batter comes up, when does that clock start? At the start of an inning, after a mound visit, after a batter timeout, following a pickoff throw or disengagement, after a challenge, a replay review, after ejections and injuries. The interesting thing is, in all of these, it requires a signal from the umpire to the field timer coordinator, who's kind of an adjunct to the official scorer. He's not, usually a he, not an official scorer, but usually sits with the official scorer. And the clock is started manually. It does not start automatically. The person doing the field timer coordinator, and I've talked to a couple of them, they can't ever take their eyes off the field because they have to look at the umpire. They have to be ready to start the clock as exactly when they're told. So changes for 2024, they actually made a few changes this year. And the main thing they did is they reduced the time between pitches from 20 to 18 seconds with runners on base. And they decided to do this because in 2023, the average time left on the timer was 7.3 seconds. They said, got that much time left, we don't need to give them the full 20 seconds. We'll take 2 seconds away from it. The next one, which I really love, is called circumvention. After a dead ball, such as a foul, time restarts when the pitcher has the ball, not when he's on the mound. And this is the language from the official MLB announcement. The purpose is to stop walking around the edge of the mound to kill time, waiting for the ball to put the ball in play. Whoops. The pitcher, and here's the third one, is really interesting. If a pitcher warms up on the game mound, he must face 1 batter in addition to the requirements of the 3-batter rule. What does that mean? Let's say you have a relief pitcher who came in and finished the previous inning and has already faced his 3 batters. He's already met the minimum. He comes back out the next inning to warm up. If he comes to the mound on the field to warm up, he must pitch to that first batter. There were 24 cases in 2023 in which a pitcher warmed up on the mound, the other team used the pinch hitter, and they wanted to change pitchers. They said, nope, it's too many inning pitcher changes. So if you are going to change pitcher and you've done your 3 batters, it's got to be warmed up. He was warm up there. If you want to do that, you have to be warmed up in the bullpen. Okay, my data source is called Gumbo. I do love that. The Grand Unified Master Baseball Object. Some six-figure person came up with that name, I'm sure. The format, for you computer people, it's JavaScript object notation, commonly called JSON, publicly available on the MLB site, but it's not publicized. They don't hide it, but they don't announce it. You have to know where to look. Time recording, as we said, down to 0.01 seconds for all game events. There are 170 data items for each pitch, including pitch type, ball, strike, of course, curveball, fastball, spin rate, elevation in inches above the ground, inside, outside, 170 items for each pitch down to the 0.01 seconds. So if you do this, it's about, and there are some 330 events per game. That includes pitches, substitutions, base running plays, disengagements, mound visits, timeouts, challenges, about 330 per game. When I did this in 2019 with the similar data, but it was nowhere near as robust as it is now. This first graph shows what I found 5 years ago. In 2018, all pitches, it was 20.3 seconds to the next pitch. What do I mean by next pitch? It means the pitcher already has to have thrown one. So the last pitch to a batter doesn't count because there is no next pitch after that. So we're trying to look for time between pitches. Now you look at the 4 lines at the bottom, ball, strike, swing, strike, and foul. They're all different from each other, and you won't be surprised to see that foul balls take the most time because there's so many different kinds of foul balls. There's a dribbler at the guy's feet. There's one hit 300 feet down the line, takes a while to get back. So it's expected that foul balls on the average will take longer. That's where the base is empty. How about with men on? With men on, all those times go up. And if you look at the right-hand column, the increase is about 7 or 8 seconds per each event, or about 40% longer when there's runners on base. That's 2018. How about 2023, the most recent one? Same format, seconds the next pitch, only now it's 17.3 seconds between pitches with the bases empty, not 20.3. The same pattern as before, but all the numbers are lower. With men on, they all go up. They go up like 4 seconds with men on, not 8 seconds. And the increase is around 20 to 25% with men on, as opposed to 40% before. So clearly, the pitch timer had a big effect. The pitchers are definitely doing this differently from the way they did it before. So with that in mind, I'm sure MLB was extremely thrilled with these results. And I decided to take those two tables and consolidate them into one to make it easier, comparing 2018 to 2023. All next pitches are 3 seconds faster, and with men on, 6.7 seconds faster. And those are for each different type. Instead of being 3 or 4 seconds between with the bases empty, they're now with a base empty, it's 6 to 7. So they're saving 3 to 4 seconds per pitch is what this shows us. So if you did the right weighted average, in 2018, it was 23.8 seconds. That includes waiting for bases empty and men on. And in 2023, it was 19.2. Now that's 4.6 seconds different per pitch. Is 4.6 seconds a lot? Well, it turns out there were 720,394 total pitches last year. I'm sure everybody knew that number. About 148 per team per game. 495,224 next pitches, meaning leaving out the last pitch to a batter. That's 69% of the total. The average game has 296 pitches with 204 next pitches. 119 of these came with bases empty, 85 with men on. So at a savings of 4.6 seconds on each next pitch, with bases empty, it saves you 6 minutes. With men on, it saves you 9 minutes. Add those up, you saved 15 minutes and 38 seconds last year, just from the pitch timer. Now that is 65% of the minutes I said lost. That's 65% of the shorter time in 2023 is accounted for by the pitch timer. So even though they were the minority of next pitches, those thrown with men on base had a much larger impact on the reduction of game time. Of course, the motivation for these shorter times is that violations are punished by either an automatic ball or an automatic strike, depending on who did the violation. This leads to a great trivia question, which is how many pitch timers violations were there in 2023? The answer is there were 1,068 violations in 2023, 766 against pitchers, 302 against batters. That's about 1 every 2¼ games, there was a pitch timer violation. Let's look at the violations during the year in 2023. You find out that as the season went along, the number of violations went way down. Clearly, people were starting to figure out they're going to get penalized for it. That's the total. There it is on pitchers. There it is on batters. So clearly, people were learning as it went on, but the pitchers had more to learn than the batters did. How many of those violations resulted in a walk or a strikeout? It's one thing to go from ball 1 to ball 2, but how about going from ball 3 to ball 4? It turns out, as I call them, decision-making violations, there were 766 ball pitch violations that were balls that led to walks. So 766 violation balls, 65 turned into a walk. That's 8.5% of the violations on pitchers became walks. For batters, there were 302 total, and 66 of them became a strikeout. But since there's so many fewer violations on batters, that's almost 22% of all the violations on batters became a strikeout. And there were there were some ejections last year. Manny Machado and Jesse Winker, for example, were ejected arguing when they were called out on strikes on a violation. If you're really interested in which players had the most of these, I have an appendix at the end that I'm not going to go into right now. I began by noting the widely reported fact that games were so much shorter, and I've shown that pitch difference is really a lot of it. So let's look at the other areas. How about time between batters? One batter is done, and the next batter comes up. The rule says it's 30 seconds. Well, here's what it was in 2018. In the first 3 innings, they weren't doing too bad. They put like 47 seconds. And as the game goes on, it takes longer and longer and longer. And the 7th inning, you're up to over a minute between batters. That's quite a change. Now, getting longer and longer, the game situation is getting tenser, whatever, it takes longer. Well, that was 2018. How about 2023? I love this graph. 2023, there's no change. Everybody clearly got the memo on this one. And the time is now 47 seconds instead of 54. So the time between batters, we're saving 7 seconds for each batter. So for these, in 2023 results, so much different. The rule says at 20 players have 30 seconds to resume play between batters. This clock begins when the action from the previous play is concluded. Somebody grounds out, he's retired at first base. That starts the clock for the next batter. However, the ending time was not reliably recorded in 2018. It is now, but it was not then. So if I want to compare those, I have to do something different. So instead, I used the start time of the last pitch to the start time of the next pitch. I figure it's got to be about the same. It's also the best I can do. So everybody did this pretty well. What's the effect on overall game time? The average game last year had 76 plate appearances. There was no transition between batters for the first man up each inning, obviously. So that subtracts 17 for an 8.5 inning game and 18 for a 9 inning game, leaving 59 and 58 transitions respectively. Using 59 as the normalizing number, the savings of 7 seconds per transition gives us 6.2 minutes saved in this category, just from the batter transitions. Combined with pitch data, we have now a savings of 21.8 minutes out of the 24 we need to find. Next thing looked at was time between innings. And this one is always interesting. How long does it take after the top half of an inning? It turns out this did not change much between 2018 and 2023. The teams have 2 hours and 2 minutes and 15 seconds, and they're all doing pretty well. It started getting slower in the 6th inning. It gets way slower after the top of the 7th because that's a 7-inning stretch. You take me at the ball game, you get God Bless America, and then it goes back down for the 8th inning. How did it look for the bottom half of the inning? It goes up steadily. So this is interesting. It says that the time between innings, even though the mandated rule is the same for the 2 years, for the top and bottom of the inning, it takes longer and longer and longer as the game goes on. So they can't completely mandate it away, that people will be taking more time as games get to be tenser. So let's look a bit more at pitcher substitutions. The pattern was the same in 2018 as in 2023, although there were fewer of them in 2023. In 2018, there were 16,000 relief appearances, 6.7 per game. For those of us who grew up in the 60s, the idea that there were 6.7 relief pitchers per game plus 2 starters is kind of mind-boggling, but that's the modern world. In 2023, it's down a little bit, but still 6.5 relief pitchers per game. That's a decrease of 3.6%. So not only did the rate of pitcher changes increase as the game progresses, but managers are more likely to bring in pitchers at the beginning of an inning. There's the total relief appearances per team per game, and you won't be too surprised to see in the first 4 innings there aren't many relief appearances at all. You start to go up in the 5th, 6th, and from there it goes up and up and up. By the time you get to extra 10 is all extra innings. By the time you get to extra innings, you have a whole bunch more relief pitchers. That's the modern world as well. That's the total. How about starting the inning? Starting the inning is 70% of the appearances, goes up really dramatically. Mid-inning peaks in the 6th, and then it goes down. So in the 7th and 8th and 9th, these crucial situations, very few of those are mid-inning changes. They are mostly starting an inning. By the time you get to extra inning, they're almost all starting an inning change. So how about mound visits? Mound visits are really interesting. In 2018, there were 5.4 per game. That's the two teams combined. They took an average of 81 seconds and consumed 7 minutes and 17 seconds. In 2023, there were 6.2 per game, so that's up, but they only took 55 seconds, and that's 5 minutes and 41 seconds. What's important to realize is in that savings of time, the rule has always said the same thing, that it's 30 seconds. But if you see my times, I found 81 5 years ago, and I found 55 this year. How does that relate to the 30-second rule? The rule says 30 seconds for mound visit begins when the manager leaves the dugout. So 30 seconds from he leaves the dugout and gets out there, and they talk, and he comes in. That turns out to be 55 seconds. So when you hear it's 30 seconds for a mound visit, it's not really. How about batter timeouts? Now, here's a chance for another trivia question. How many batter timeouts were there in the average game last year? Turns out there were almost 25,000 batter timeouts per game. That's about 10.1 per game, 13.2% of plate appearances. Every time I show this to somebody, they say, it sure seems like a lot more than 13% of plate appearances. Looks like it happens every inning, but it doesn't. Average duration of a timeout is 14.7 seconds. Again, I can't compare this to 2018 because we didn't have the ability to time this. So it occurred to me to ask when these timeouts were called, specifically after what type of pitch. As I see these events, there's two main scenarios. The batter might be, that's 2 minutes and 30 seconds per game. If the batter is unhappy with himself after a bad swing, or the batter is unhappy with the plate umpire after a call he didn't like. So here's the possible pitches. There are none, all of it. You can read all those. I don't have to read them to you. So let's highlight those. The called strike would be if you're unhappy with the umpire, that's 20%. Swinging strike or foul ball, those two added together were over 50%. So over half of the timeouts were called after the batter swung at the ball. So I presume that's on him and not necessarily on the umpire. Now, the interesting thing about this is what was the count when the batter timeout was called? It turns out that overwhelmingly they're called with 2 strikes. The batters are getting a little more anxious with 2 strikes. There are some that are called before everyone takes a pitch, but 84% of them are done with 2 strikes. How about, okay, that's 9.3% of all 2-strike counts, which is a lot. How about injuries and ejections? Challenges and injuries and ejections were quite similar between the 2 years, and they came out to this. 487 injuries take almost 2 minutes. 174 ejections take just under 2 minutes. 174 ejections events lost 247 people because many of them were multiple people events. So the last item on my list was challenges, and this is pretty amazing. Last year, in 2018, there were 1,100. Last year, there were 1,468, 368 more challenges last year. But look at the times. The times went down while the number went up. Instead of being 3 minutes for each challenge, they're down to 1 minute and 26 seconds. So instead of consuming 1 minute and 24 seconds per game, they're consuming 52 seconds per game. Now, this has nothing to do with the pitch timer because the replay challenges are all handled in New York. It has nothing to do with what the pitch timer is. So somehow, Major League Baseball decided to speed things up, and all the time, the challenges are taking much less time. Okay, here's a summary. Pitches saved 65%, 15 minutes per game, 65% of the 24 minutes I wanted to find. Better transitions saved 6 minutes, that's 25%. Mound visits saved a minute and a half, that's 6.7%. Challenges saved 32 seconds, that's 2%. The total is 23 minutes and 54 seconds, which is 99.6% of the 24 minutes I had to find. You can't imagine how pleased I was when I got that 99.6 number to come out of that. And so I enter this with a picture of an umpire invoking a violation. This is the universal symbol now. Reach up to an imaginary wristwatch and put your fingers on it. That shows that the violation has occurred. Okay, that's it.
I had someone in the chat say, wow, I don't think David's done his research at all. Firmly planted in cheek. You know what time it is, folks. If you want to ask a question of our presenter, David Smith, tonight, go down to the bottom of the screen and hit the react button. You'll see a second button that says raise hand. Raise your hand, and you can get in to ask a question of David Smith tonight. I've got one. Do you see Major League Baseball tweaking the rules any further this year to try to compress games a little bit more, or do you see them just leaving it alone for a year?
Well, I was surprised that it actually was another 4 minutes slower this year. I didn't think that was going to happen.
Yeah.
The only thing I see as an area for fiddling with it, you may notice that pitchers are always throwing the ball out. They'll get a new ball, I don't like it, and I throw it out. In fact, I was at a Phillies game last year where Rob Thompson, the Phillies manager, got ejected because Aaron Nola was throwing out 3 balls an inning. Oh, I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't. Clearly, he's just to me. He was stalling for time. He was extending his pitch clock, and the umpires said, "No, you can't do it. You can't do it." This year, I didn't see that at all. But they're still throwing them out. But there's no complaint. You know, first of all, every pitch that hits the dirt is a new ball and has to restart the timer. So that changes that time between pitches. And pitchers, they don't like the feel of the ball. They throw it out. They don't get challenged on it. It just keeps on going. So if they want to change anything, it would be that you can't just throw the ball out. But there's a few enough. I don't think they're going to change very much. I don't see any other obvious place to do it.
You mentioned that. It makes me think of Jim Palmer years ago, where he could throw a ball back to the ump would put it in his bag, throw out another ball, and then go back to the original one that Palmer
he knew it.
gave back, and he knew it, but Palmer knew it. It's amazing.
Because he was a safe cracker in a previous life. Yeah.
That's for sure. That's real. Let's go to get some questions going here. Douglas Rubin, you are up. Doug, how you doing tonight?
I'm great. Great to see you, David. I met you a couple of times at the
Yes, indeed.
Thank you. So I am obviously baseball is not going to do anything about inter-inning breaks, timeouts. I'm highly sensitive to trying to avoid commercials. I don't watch the MLB app because there's no way to bypass the commercials.
Right.
MLB TV, there used to be a way. So I listen to the games on Sirius. Usually delay, and I click the 15-second button 8 times between innings, and pitch changes like about 5 or 6 times, although it was different during the World Series.
Yeah, World Series, all the numbers change.
Yeah. So I don't know. I they talk about making the game shorter, but is the time between innings with the commercials, is that completely off the table?
I think so. I've heard other people say this too. What I'm about to say. Any number of times I was watching a game and an inning would start and they already would have thrown 1 or 2 pitches. That they don't come back to start the because they're going to get their 2 minutes and 15 seconds to get their commercials in. There's no question about it, even if it costs them time on the game.
With today's technology, with widescreen TVs, high definition and such, they're able to bring the game back while a commercial is still running in that letterbox.
Right.
That you see so frequently, especially in national broadcasts. With Fox, they'll go to a little box and then have the Geico gecko dancing there or some darn fool thing. But I would think that clubs would want to bring it back so you can see every pitch, even if they have to finish a commercial that way. I mean,
So I'm a little cynical than you. You think they're doing that so everybody can see the game. I think they're doing that so they can sneak in another commercial in their little box.
Well, yeah, that's what you have a good point. That's kind of what I'm driving at. But what I'm driving at is that inning transition. They're not through with their commercials, so you're missing a pitch or two.
Yep.
Why can't we use that technology so you're not missing those two pitches or whatever?
Right. Fox does that, but most local broadcasts do not do that.
Correct. I think Chicago does the Cubs, but after that, I don't know of anybody else who does that.
Well, the Phillies, the Phillies are the team closest to me. They're 45 miles away. So I know the Phillies more than any. They certainly do not do that.
They don't. I thought I remember seeing somebody do it. It's probably not. I'm obviously mistaken. I'll probably wake up at 2 a.m. and say, "Oh yeah, I remember." Hey Tyler, you're up, man. How you doing? Good to see you. One of our newest SABR members. You're in, man.
Good. Hey Tyler,
I appreciate it. Hey David, again, this is my first SABR meeting ever, so thank you for that presentation. That was awesome.
Oh, great, thank you.
I wanted to ask your slide on the batter timeouts.
Right.
Obviously, I think it said it was an 84% that they'd call it on 2 strike counts.
Yes.
Is there any data on what 2 strike counts? So 0-2, 1-2, 2-2, full count.
Yes,
I'd assume.
I did all that, of course. But I didn't want to make a slide that had 12 lines on it. So it turns out that it didn't matter too much. 0-2 and 3-2 were about the same.
Okay,
That's
interesting.
a really good question. I was just trying to make the slide a little simpler.
Thank you so much for that. I was thinking about that. So
yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hey Tyler, while I got you here for a minute, let me ask you, what is what's your lane with SABR right now? Do you have any interests in burgeoning now that you've joined?
Repeat that last part. Do I have any interest?
Do you have any interests that are percolating now that you've joined, or did you join for a specific reason?
I joined because I'm 22. So I
remember being 22 at one time in my life. It was a while ago.
I have shoes older than that.
So I grew up obviously sort of in the Moneyball age. I've read the book, I've watched the movie, whoever knows how many times. I'm big into sort of like pitching analytics. I love the art of pitching. And I sort of, I joined SABR. I just want to, sort of soak up any information that I can about the game, talk to people like you guys, listen to presentations like David's. So all I really do, I'm just on like Twitter, whatever. So, I wanted to find, a group that had, I don't know, a little more, like community feel to it.
Well, we certainly appreciate that. You are hooked up with a tremendous chapter leader with Donna Muscarella, who's here this evening. She has got numerous events planned and in the planning stages for your group. So watch for that because she's got some dynamite stuff coming out. What else do we have for David Smith tonight? I've got a couple of things in the chat. Tom Emerson posted this question. With the speedier game, is it expected that any stats might be impacted? Pickoffs for sure, maybe steals. How about other statistics? What's your thought on that, David?
That's a great thought. The other rule change, the pickoff rule, I did a careful study on stolen base effect. I didn't present that here because that thing's already getting pretty long. Stolen bases are up 25% since they put in the disengagement rule. And not just attempt, but success. And what happens, I see it over and over, pitcher throws over twice. Well, runner's going. He can't throw over again, right? So as soon as he throws over twice and then he twitches and the runner is off. So there's clearly an impact on stolen base attempts and on stolen base success. But I looked at all the other things and I couldn't find any other category that I could say was going to be affected by that.
If Ricky Henderson played today, his career would have somewhere around 1.5 million stolen bases, I think.
You mean it didn't?
Good point. Don, okay, I'm going to butcher your last name, Don. Don, are you able to turn on your mic and help me with your last name?
We direct traffic.
Okay, Don Wiederact has a question in the chat. Thank you, Donald. I didn't want to ruin that, and I knew it was coming. Do
Okay.
you think college baseball needs to adapt a pitch clock since games run over 3 hours? What's your thought on that, David? Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
College baseball is such a funny thing. You know, we got different substitution rules. They're using aluminum bats.
Mhm.
I don't know. I just don't really have an opinion on any of the non-professional stuff. I guess that's a bigoted thing to say, but I'm just really into the professional ones.
No, because I don't have an opinion on it either. I don't watch much outside of professional baseball, including the independent leagues. I want to make that clear because there's a lot of that is really, really good baseball. So we have got some other great questions lined up for you. I want to go to John Bartolick. John, how you doing?
Doing good.
Go
David,
get him.
I think you gave me a retro sheet T-shirt in Pittsburgh, so I'm a proud owner of it, and I love the service. Maybe I missed it, but have you done a correlation between the number of pitches thrown in a game and the impact on game time as well? It seems like they could speed the game up significantly by just starting everyone at 3 and 2.
The paper I did in Pittsburgh in 2019, when you got your shirt, or 2017, when you got your shirt, I did look exactly at number of pitches. And one of the big things, of course, is the different events take different numbers of pitches. The average walk takes 5.2 pitches. The average strikeout takes 4.3 or something like that. So I did look at that, and it turns out that the number of pitches is a real significant. Before pitch timer, the number of pitches was a major predictor of game time.
I recall now that you mentioned that the presentation, I guess it was particularly the foul balls that were spiking up the pitch times as well.
You were there. That's good.
Yeah, and I was just thinking back to Norman Mack's Connie Mack biographies, and back in the pre-1900 days, they were complaining about game times, game lengths, and should they allow foul balls to be strikes or not. And it just strikes me as how we keep in baseball complaining about the same things century after century.
Well, I will be really snarky here. Certainly many fans will say they're happier with the shorter games, but before the pitch timer went into effect, I honestly don't think I've heard any fans complaining about game length. Sports writers complained about it all the time. And so I'd be in the press box. I'm lucky I get a press credential so I can sit in the Phillies press box. And I almost said to one guy one night, if you hate your job so much, why don't you quit? You know, if you hate being here. I didn't say it, but what are you complaining about? How hard is it to sit there for 3 hours and 10 minutes and watch a baseball game? But I'm sure there are some fans that are as excited about it, but mostly I saw the sports writers pushing it.
Thank you.
Hey, Bruce, this is Tom. I'm sorry to jump in. I had a comment. I didn't see any smiles or hear anyone laugh when John made the suggestion of starting everyone off at 3 and 2.
Right.
I don't think you were serious, Tom, but that's that's an idea.
I that it went over my head. It came back. I'm like, wait, did he just say that? Yeah, he did just say that.
Right. It's like putting a man on second to start the 10th. It's
you mean the Manfred man, right?
The Manfred man. So when Molly will tell you this, she'll back me up on this. When the pitch clock came into play, and it got the game moving at a more crisp way, like it did when I was a child, I was rather excited because, I mean, frankly, I could watch more or all of a game before falling asleep on the couch and having to have her drag me up to bed so I could get to work the next morning. So as you can see her shaking her head. So I was one who was like, oh yeah, this is a really good addition. But Tony in the chat, Tony, do you want to ask this question on camera? Because it segues from my comment nicely. Go ahead, Tony.
Sure. Yes. Hi there, Mr. Smith. Just wanted to ask a question. I know when pitch timer initially came out, they were reviewing it after the first year. I thought I heard that there was talks that they were discussing whether to continue it or if there was a period where they would look at that again. Do you see, this part of the game not ever going away. Once it's met what it's supposed to do, which was to shorten the game back the way they wanted it. Do you think this will ever go away, or is this here for forever?
It's here forever, just like the idiot runner on second base in extra innings is here forever. I mean, they're not going to change it. From the MLB's point of view, it's a wild success, and they're not going to change.
Same with the ghost runner at second, then that's going to stay.
Yeah.
That bothers me the way it's implemented, because it is not implemented in the postseason. In the postseason, you're playing traditional baseball. Now, I understand that the runner on second rule is derived from the international rule that's used in the Olympics or international play, but you got to make a choice. And I'm not sure that having two sets of rules is the right choice, because if somebody correct me if I'm wrong, even the National Hockey League doesn't change their overtime rule in the playoffs. Am I right on that? Does anybody know?
The NHL does change
they
their
don't.
overtime
Sorry,
rule. in the
Bruce.
Well, they
playoffs.
do.
Yeah,
Sorry, Bruce,
it's
but
play
from-
until you drop in the playoffs.
As somebody who lives in an NHL city, yeah, it's overtime until you're done.
Well, the NFL does that too. Super Bowl will,
Yeah.
will keep going.
Okay, so I'm wrong on that aspect, but I just not a fan of the way that it's implemented. Let's go to Greg Feg. Go ahead.
The ghost runner doesn't just have to be a runner on second. There's some places that started with runners on first and second. And when I was reprogramming our software, and when the rule came in, we had to allow for all these possibilities. So far, MLB has only had the runner on second, but I would not bet a whole lot that they weren't going to change that to be first and second.
Ooh. Oh, that set the baseball world on fire. Hey, Greg Fegley, you're up, man. How you doing, Greg?
Doing great.
What's going on, man?
Hey,
Go on.
Hey, David, I really enjoyed your presentation.
Thanks, Greg.
Really good, and really helps understand how the changes affected the time the time it takes to play a baseball game. The pitch clock and the time it takes a batter to get into the batter's box, those rule changes just mostly seem to just affect the pace of the game. They don't really affect the game per se. They don't give the pitcher an advantage. They don't really give the batter an advantage. They just simply make the game move along quicker.
I agree.
But the disengagement, two disengagements you explained, there were 20 base runners were 25% successful in running after the second disengagement,
Yep.
which that rule change would seem to be giving the base runner an advantage. Is there any way that Major League Baseball might modify that rule? I mean, I was thinking about the question, and I was thinking, well, if you give the pitcher 3 disengagements, then the base runner still, if he waits until that third disengagement, he still will have an advantage. So adding a disengagement wouldn't seem to be the answer. Is there can you think of any way that, or am I maybe missing that a little bit?
No, that's you're right, and it's intentional. Remember, they made the bases bigger too. They made them 2 inches bigger, so it's now 2 inches shorter, 1 inch at each end to steal a base, which can matter. So they made the bases bigger. You limited the disengagements, and you've got many more people taking off as a result of that. And MLB, when they put it in, said, we want to have more offense, too much pitching. The pitching is too dominant. So maybe that would happen. These proposals to start with a 2-1 count or start with a 3-2 count, all that means is that you would have only pitchers that throw 100 miles an hour. There would be games that were 45 pitches, all of which were 100 miles an hour. There'd be no offense whatsoever.
Right. Well, I was just thinking, just so that nobody has an advantage in the game.
Right.
That's just I really anticipated that base running, the 25% success rate. I'm not surprised.
25% increase of attempts.
Oh, well, okay. I even thought it might have even been greater than that.
No, but the success rate went up a bit. It went from like 72 or 3% up to 77 to 78. That's success rate.
Okay.
And because the break-even, Pete Palmer showed this a long time ago, the break-even point for a steal second is about 2/3. If you make it 2/3 of the time, it was a good play. If you don't, it's a bad play. So the 25% is of attempts, not of success.
I got you. But still, yeah, that's a pretty big jump. That's
Oh, it is. It is.
Anyway, I mean, I guess I like the rule changes. The disengagement, I still don't really think I don't know. I think that still could use some work somehow, but I don't know how you change that, modify that rule.
No, game 5 of the World Series, we had a block after two throws, and he stepped off and it was a block.
Yeah.
I guess he threw the first again. It's kind of hard not to be able to count all the way to 3, but he seemed to have trouble. It was Luke Weaver, I think, did that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
So Lawrence Pucciarelli in the chat. I looked at some World Series box scores in 1947 games were less than 2.5 hours, and there were a number of pitching changes and, of course, pitchers hit. So that's a very interesting comment out of Lawrence. Gary Joquin has a good comment here. He writes, does anyone miss aspects of the game like the cat and mouse with the pitcher holding runners on first? I think that it favors the runner too much. Are there any downsides or regrets about implementing the pitch clock? David, what do you say to that?
Regrets by whom? I mean, MLB doesn't regret it at all. They specifically said they wanted more base running because they wanted more action. They like triples and they like steals because they get people excited. And they specifically wanted to make more stolen bases, and they got it.
Yep. And then, segueing off of that, I'm going to go out of order here for just a minute because Dick Kramer's got a good comment in the chat. Doesn't anyone other than me appreciate how the pitch clock improves the pace of the game, minimizing the dead time when you are listening or watching, not actually at the game? I'm one of those, Dick. I'm with you, my man, because I can get through most of a game in the evening when I get home from work now. So I'm with you on that. Ken Edwards, you're up, man. How you doing?
Great, Bruce. How are you?
Terrific. Thanks. You're on.
David, thanks for the contribution that you've made through the sheet. Tremendous. And this is great research. Appreciate it very much. I listened to many of the YouTube radio baseball games from the 60s and 70s. They're obviously shorter than even what we have now, and your charts show that. Have you considered going back to a sample of those games in the 60s and 70s and identifying why those are still somewhat shorter on average than even the games in 2024? My hypothesis is that it's due to greater scientific knowledge with respect to working the count now than existed back in the 60s and 70s. And also shorter between inning times when there weren't quite as many radio or television commercials. Have you thought about doing that research?
No, I agree with you completely. Yes, the time between innings for commercials is real, but it's part of my presentation in Pittsburgh in 2017. Number of pitches is different. That in the 60s there weren't as many pitches. That I think people are more attuned to working the count these days. Now, I'm not going to say it's because umpiring has changed, because that's nonsense. There's always been good umpire calls and bad umpire calls. I don't think that's going to change. But there are definitely more pitches now. Our pitch data only goes back to 1987, so I can't tell you what it was before that. But I made a extrapolation. How many balls hit in play? How many walks? How many strikeouts? And there clearly were fewer pitches being thrown in 1965 than there are now.
Thank you.
Donna Muscarella made a comment in the chat. She says, I miss the cat and mouse. As far as downsides or regrets, I think owners realized very quickly the impact the quicker and shorter game was having on concession and merchandise sales. Prices increased accordingly. That is, less people were going because they were missing too much of the game. I have to agree with her on that one. I think they have found a way to compensate for that anomaly.
Yeah, by making $8 for a hot dog.
Yeah, right. There you go. Let's go to Joe Ross. Joe, what's going on, man?
they compensate by raising prices. That was easy.
Yeah, you know.
I got to tell you, I don't particularly like the automatic runner. It's a runner you didn't earn, so I don't think they belong there anyway. In the old days, games had to be shorter. It got dark. They had no lights. However, David, great presentation.
Thank you.
Did a lot of work to get that, I can tell already.
It was a slog.
Now, ever since the game was founded about a year or so just before Bruce was born, they they required 9 pitches for a walk, 9 balls for a walk, and 5 balls for a strike. Very simple rule change. Instead of 4 balls for a walk, make it 3. Instead of 3 balls for a strike, make it 2. They've been doing that since the founding of the game. That would make the game faster, but it would not take away from what Donna referred to, and I agree, the cat and mouse of the pitcher trying to hold the runner. That's what makes the game really interesting, is when you get a speed demon on first and you go through the machinations of a good pitcher trying to keep him close to the bag and then watch him steal anyway. I mean, that's the exciting part of the game.
Well, I remember in 1962 when Maury Wills stole 104 bases, Roger Craig, who was pitching for the Mets, had been a Dodger, and he hated the way Wills was stealing. He threw over to first base, I think, like 12 straight times one day, and then Wills stole on the next pitch. So just drove him crazy. So the changes of making it 3 balls for a walk and 2 balls for a strikeout, that's like starting with a 2-1 count or 3-2 count. You're going to end up with many fewer pitches being thrown. You're going to end up with many fewer pitchers, because each pitcher who now throws 80 pitches with the magic pitch count number, 80 pitches now you hope gets you through 4 innings. That'll get you through 6 innings, get you through 7 innings. It'll change a whole bunch of things in roster construction and everything else. I'm not sure if I'm in favor of it or not. It's not going to happen. You're right that they used to change it a lot, but it hasn't changed in 120 years. I don't think it's going to change again.
Well, don't forget, pitchers back in those days used to go the distance all the time.
All the time.
Now, the number of complete games, you can count on one hand for any.
No, there were 26 complete games this year.
Yeah, well, that's less than 1 per team.
Oh yeah, less than 1 per team.
That's the answer. If a pitcher now goes only 5, maybe he'll go 7. What's wrong with that?
Well, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying with the implications that are huge, it would change the way the roster is constructed.
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't have as big a bullpen, because right now they have restrictions. You must have a certain number of pitchers on your active roster for the day. You got to turn the list of the 26 guys, and you have to designate how many of them are pitchers, and that would change.
Okay. Yeah. So what?
That's okay with me, but I don't think they've thought through it enough to make that change.
Okay.
I remember when I really first became that big fan as a child. You had your 7-inning starter, your 8th inning reliever, and your closer in the 9th, your Gossage, Suter, Lee Smith in the 9th, and that was it. Or even in some cases, you had your 6-inning starter and then your 3-inning reliever that earned the save for just being in there 3 innings. Those were the days, huh?
Yeah, well, I addressed that in 2016 in my paper in Miami, which was one of the ones I won the award for, called "The Myth of the Closer." Yes. It's on our website. You should take a look. Closers are absurdly overrated and not used the way everybody thinks they're used.
Interesting. Gary Joquin, you're up. Gary, how you doing?
Oh, pretty good, Bruce. Hey, I just wanted to reframe the question that I posed a few minutes ago about whether or not anyone has any regrets or perceived downsides to the implementation of the pitch clock. I really don't care what Major League Baseball thinks or wants. I'm wondering, has there been any work done to poll the fans on their response to these rule changes and to determine whether or not there's a distinction between, say, for example, longtime fans versus the more marginal fans whose attention spans might be the length of a gnat?
That's a wonderful question. I have not seen any such polling results. I would love to do it. It'd be like the comparison people want to make is how exciting football is. You see any number of analyses, and a 60-minute football game actually has like 12 minutes of action. The rest is standing around. With George Will, who's a mixed bag anyway, in my opinion, he says that football embodies the two worst parts of American society, which is committee meetings punctuated by violence.
Yeah. I would love to see what kind of a job George Carlin would do with this today.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Classic.
So I agree with you. I'd love to see what people think about this, but this idea that how long it takes, well, compared to what? You know, what's the alternative? I mean, I was the other day looking for the football game and realized that they used to be a game at 1 and then a game at 4. Now they're at 1 and at 4:30 because they know they're not going to be done in 3 hours. Because the average football game is much longer than the average baseball game.
Yep, that's absolutely true. You know, I belong to the Fans at Bat program with Major League Baseball, and they send out surveys occasionally. I distinctly remember after last year's season concluded, a survey was sent out about rule changes. And I can't quite remember how I answered it, but I know I did. I know they polled fans through that, but they never made the data garnered from that poll public.
Well, my cynical self says that means they didn't like the answers.
So yeah, they probably didn't like the answers. You got a good point there. Well, this has been wicked cool. I am so thrilled to have had you in tonight. Now we are back next week, Monday, November 18th at 7 p.m. Eastern, when SABR member Anthony Salazar will be with us to give his SABR 52 presentation, Building a WPA Ballpark, Baseball and the New Deal, 1934 to 1942. The sign-up link is available in the SABR events calendar at sabr.org/events and is included in the meeting schedule booklet that is circulated each Monday. And finally, if you're a baseball fan watching on YouTube and you like what you see, please like this video and subscribe to our channel to be alerted to each of our uploads. And if you're not yet a member, you need to join the Society for American Baseball Research, the premier baseball community. Offering an amazing baseball buffet of options to explore your fandom, SABR boasts more than 35 different research committees, over 80 regional chapters, and innumerable opportunities to connect with baseball minds across the world. For more information, go to sabr.org/join today. David Smith, I cannot thank you enough for doing this. Thank you.
I really appreciate you inviting me. This was a lot of fun.
I really appreciate it. We had a heck of a lot of fun. Let's get everybody out of here. We're going to see everybody next week. Have a good night, folks.